Hello and welcome to our discussion today. We want to look at HR data management. And in our discussion today, we want to focus on the importance of HR management. And then we look at the types of HR data and their sources. Then we'll also look at data collection, the storage, and security practices. Then we look at how data is analyzed for strategic decision making. And then we'll also look at some compliance, privacy, and ethical issues related to HR data management. So we first look at what HR data management is. Simply, it is the process, or it involves the processes and technologies that are used to collect, to store, to manage, analyze, and protect data related to human resource functions in an organization. So for every organization, you have people working there. So all the processes and the technologies that you will use to collect, to store, manage, analyze, and protect their data, their information is what you call HR data management, right? And you can have lots of data. You can have different types of data in an organization. Okay, you can have some personal information about the employees. So this will include their personal details, maybe where they schooled, their history, their ages, their previous work that they've done, right? All of those are data that you can have. You can have information about recruitment and onboarding, right? You would have to, you would be exposed to when these people were employed, how long they have been working in the organization, right? The conditions under which they were employed and all of those. You would also have data related to payroll and compensation. You realize that not everyone is paid the same amount in all organizations. People are paid based on the work they do and based on the conditions under which they work. And so all of those information will be available to you for every employee. Then you also have information related to the employee's performance and then trainings that they've had in the organization. And then you can also have information about the attendance of the employee when they come to work, when they close from work, their leave records, when they took the last leave, how often they request for leave, and all of those. Okay. So you realize that in every organization, you have access to lots of data that need to be managed. What then is the importance of all of this data in HRM? And this time for HR decision making. The first one is that um, access to all of this data in an organization enhances strategic decision making. So if the organization wants to make long-term decisions that would not be based on speculations or assumptions, then it is important that they work with these kind of data available in the organization, right? So it enhances strategic decision making, where decision making is based on figures, is based on facts and not assumptions or speculations. Secondly, it ensures regulatory compliance. If you have data about employees, then it helps you to comply with all the regulations that you have to comply with. For example, if we pick the age for when people have to go on retirement, for example, okay, if you don't have any data on the employee, you would not even know if they have hit the retirement age, and they'll still be working in the organization. And this will mean that you are not complying with the laws of the land. Okay, so it's important that as you keep this record and as you work with the data available to you, you are able to comply with all the regulations that the the jurisdiction within which you work requires of you. Okay. And then it also improves data accuracy and efficiency. If you have data that is well managed in the organization, you would know when to do what. You'll know at what time an employee is due for leave, when they have to resume. You know when to query an employee for not maybe doing what they have to do or what is required of them. Okay, so it improves data accuracy and then efficiency. You get to know when to promote a particular employee, when to get them to be on their toes because they are not being productive, and all of those. The fourth one is that it supports talent management and workforce planning. Okay, sometimes in an organization there is retrenchment. There are times that HR has to employ more people. There are times that you realize some of the employees have to go for training, and all of these are based on the data that is available or the data that you are working with. And then number five, it enables performance tracking and employee development. Okay, like I've said, if you know the particular trainings that an employee has had, it is unlikely that you would ask them to go for the same trainings again after they have gone for the training maybe about 5 years ago. But because you were even if you were not around at the time they went for the training, there are records to show that a particular employee has gone through that training. And so you would not come and tell them to go over the training again, unless, of course, they really need to go through that training. And then the sixth one is that it fosters transparency and trust in the HR processes. Employees get to trust the system well because they are confident and they know that management is working based on information that's available and not because they want to favor one employee over the other. So data in decision making is very, very important. And as an HR person, it's important that you work with the correct data. So what then are the types of HR data that you are likely to be seeing? The first one, you have the demographic data. The demographic data refers to the data related to the age, the gender, okay, the educational level of your employees, their marital status, the number of children they have, okay, which part of the city they stay in, all right, all of those information are part of the demographic data. Then you also have the employment data that will show the job title, the department within which they work, all right, how much they are paid at the end of the month, how long they have worked, or if it's a contract, whether the contract has been exhausted or not. Okay. If they are casual workers, you get to know the conditions of work, right? Then you also have information about the performance, or you call it the performance data. So you get to know the appraisals that have been done, the various reports that were generated from the appraisals, what was done with the appraisal reports. You get to know the goals that have been achieved by the employee, right? The tasks that have been completed by the employee, those that are pending, and all of those. You also get to know feedback from their various supervisors. Okay, and this is data that is available to you. You also have data that is related to training. So you get to know the courses that have been taken, the various certifications, and how they are developing the skills over the period of work they have stayed in the organization. Then you also have attendance data. Attendance data makes you know how punctual an employee is. It makes you know when they came into work, when they left. All right. It makes you know how regular employees are to work. Okay. And whether they just show up and leave or they are doing the work that they have to do. And then you also have data related to the exit of employees. Remember that it's not ideal that an employee will work in an organization for his or her whole lifetime. So at some point in time, an employee would want to leave the organization. And when they decide to leave, you will also have data that is related to maybe their reasons for leaving, all right, or conditions under which they are leaving, who they are handing over to, right? And then how you are going to compensate them finally. Okay, so you also have data related to the exit of employees. Now, what are the sources of HR data? The sources of HR data in every organization is a lot, right? And in this course, we are looking at human resource information systems. That's one of the major sources of HR data. So that as you keep inputting information on the system over time, you have a lot of data that is available for use by the HR department. So one source of HR data is the platform or the HRIS platform that is being used. There are a lot of them, okay? And every organization has a preference. So depending on what the organization chose, then they are going to have a lot of information sitting on that platform. You can also have manual records and spreadsheets, okay, as sources of HR data. So sometimes manually you get to record information about employees, maybe in a logbook or on an Excel sheet or on some application, and that becomes a source of data for you as and when you need to use it. There are also employee self-service portals, sorry. So the ESS portals help employees to be able to navigate through the HRIS platforms themselves. And as they do this, they get to input information by themselves. So for example, if an employee wants to request for leave, they request for the leave and they give a reason why they are going for the leave. So that reason they gave for embarking on the leave becomes data that is available to the HR department. So for example, if the reason is health related, then quickly the HR department gets to know that, oh, this employee or that employee has a particular health issue that they are working on. Or if it's a family issue, it also gets the HR department alerted. So employee self-service portals becomes a source of HR data. Then you also have performance management systems, which is also a source of HR data. Okay, so whilst for example, there's a course that the employee takes on a platform, the performance of that employee on that course will be tracked. So if, for example, it was a duration of 3 months, HR department gets to know how regular the employee was in taking that course during the 3 months. Okay, it makes the HR department get to know the frequency, the times that the course was accessed, and all of that. Okay, so that becomes information that's available to the HR department. Then you also have the attendance systems. It could be biometric or yeah. So the biometric attendance system is also a source of data for HR. So when every employee comes to work and they use the machine, they use the system, information is downloaded and made available to the HR department, which can be used for other decision making in the organization. Okay. And then the final source of data is surveys and feedback tools. So at maybe some regular intervals, the HR team may want to conduct surveys right? So they distribute questionnaires and they get feedback from employees. This feedback is also some important data that the HR team can work with. What then are the data collection methods? Okay, there are several data collection methods. We just spoke about the surveys. So you can have employee surveys and assessments. That's the number 3 we have here. You can also have data collection from the digital forms and portals. There are times that you share links for employees to fill forms, and as they fill the forms, it makes information available to you. We also spoke about the biometric systems that can be used to pick up data, right? All right. So another method of the data collection, or another method for collecting the data, is to interview employees when they are leaving the organization. So those exit interviews helps you to collect the data from employees. And then finally, if you have um a system where your ERP systems or enterprise resource planning systems are integrated with your payroll and other systems in the organization, you realize that you are able to get information from other divisions in the organization without necessarily doing anything to get them. Okay, so because the system is integrated, you are able to access information from various sources, maybe from the procurement department, from other divisions in the organization, right? Okay, so in the data collection, there are some principles that um, have to be upheld, right? There's a need to ensure that there's accuracy, okay? That there is accuracy. So it's not just picking data, and so because you are picking data, then you are just getting everything onto the system like that. It's important that you ensure that the data you are picking is accurate, right? Everything is correct. You are getting the information on time, right? Otherwise, you would have the information, but it will no more be relevant. So you are getting the information, you are getting the data, and you are picking the data on time. You also have to ensure that the data you are picking is relevant. The fact that you are picking data does not mean that what you have really is what is needed. So ensure that the data is relevant, that you really need it. Otherwise, don't take it. Okay, so if you don't need the medical report of an employee and it's not relevant for any decision that you'll be making, then there's no point collecting that medical report. But if the organization maybe is going to pay, right, or there's some insurance that the employee is going to benefit from, then that report can be taken. Okay, or if the report will be used for some other um maybe some other activity in the organization, then it's relevant, so it can be taken. Otherwise, there's no need to take the medical report. And then you also have to ensure that what you have is consistent. Okay, so if you are following a particular format, it should be like that over the years. All right, so that you'll be able to analyze the information easily. All right, if the format is not consistent, then it makes analysis difficult. Okay. So we look at the storage and data. Some of the data storage options are what we've discussed already. You have on-premise, you can have the cloud-based, all right? And then you can also have the data warehouses where you have a lot of data. This is for very, very large organizations where they have to integrate a lot of data. Okay, but for us, our focus is on the on-premise HRIS systems and then the cloud-based platforms, which we have discussed already. So if you have to go back and refresh, I'd advise that you do that. Okay, so these are the storage options. Either you have it on site or you have it on the cloud. And then you have some measures that have to be taken to ensure that the information you have collected is safe. All right. Otherwise, you collect sensitive information from employees, and if you don't keep them well, unauthorized people would have access. Okay. So there's the need to encrypt, all right, use firewalls, and then also use role-based access controls, right? And then there's the need to have regular backups to ensure that the data you have kept has not been tampered with, or unauthorized users are not fidgeting with the information that you have in a way that will make the data not authentic. Okay, and you also have to ensure that you are complying with both local and international regulations, because from what we see now, organizations are not just limited by the local laws. There are some organizations that are international organizations. So if you have employees scattered all over the world, then you don't limit yourself to only the local compliance regulations, but also international compliance regulations. Okay, so it's important that you store the data safely and you ensure that the data is secure in a way that will not expose employees to any theft or to any harm, right? Now we look at HR data analysis and then the decision making. Remember that for all the information that is available, for all the data that you have available, it is to be able to make important decisions, right? How will you make use of the information? Okay, so the first one is the descriptive analysis, where you look at the data available to you and you try to answer the question of what happened. Okay, so here you want to describe the situation. You want to describe the current state, or you want to describe an event. And so you pick data that is collected to that event or to that employee, or data around the time you want to describe. And then based on that, you are able to analyze. So if you are performing a descriptive analysis, what you are doing is trying to tell a story of what happened. Okay. And sometimes you can use this when you want to explain why, or when you want to say what is happening in an organization. For example, a lot of people are leaving the organization, and so there's a high turnover rate. So you have the descriptive analytics that is explaining or what happened, that is saying what happened. Okay. Then you have the diagnostic analytics. This one is making you get reasons, all right, giving you reasons why what happened actually happened. So in describing the situation, you are looking at the turnover rates, you are saying what happened. Then in diagnosing what happened, you want to look at why it happened. So if the people are leaving, why are they leaving? Or why did they leave? Okay, so that is the diagnostic analytics. Then you have the predictive analytics, where you try to forecast what is likely to happen. So based on the current situation where you have a high turnover rate, you want to predict what might happen in maybe 2 years or in 3 years or in the next 6 months. You want to be able to predict what might happen. And that's what you call the predictive analytics. Okay. And then you also have the prescriptive analytics that makes you know the precautions or what you have to do. Okay, so the prescriptive analytics makes you know what to do to prevent maybe the high turnover rates. Okay, so this analytics will help you to know what strategies to put in place to retain your employees in such a way that they do not leave, the organization, right? And there are various tools that are used to conduct or to perform these analytics. You have Excel, you have Power BI, you have Tableau, HRIS analytics modules. Okay, so inside the HRIS, you have analytics that helps you to do all of these analysis, right? But there are several tools that are used to analyze the data that is available to you. And you can have descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, or the prescriptive. Okay. Then there are also some key concerns when it comes to privacy and ethical issues. It's important that for employees' personal data, you keep it confidential. Okay, so you ensure that for sensitive employee information, you keep all those information confidential in such a way that you don't expose the employees to harm. And then you also ensure that there is transparency. As you are collecting the data, the employees should know why you are collecting the data. They should give you their consent. Okay, they should allow you to take the data you are collecting from them and also use the data in ways that you have informed them of. Okay, so you need their consent and transparency in data collection. And then, as much as possible, as you are interpreting the data and you are analyzing the information available to you, it's important that you minimize bias. Okay, minimize the way you try to put meanings into the data. Let the data speak for itself. All right, and then you also ensure fairness. Okay, as you take the decisions, for example, if someone merits a promotion, it's important that you give to them. Okay, that you don't hide behind personal sentiments and then restrict people from having access to what they really deserve. So you ensure fairness. So the ethical practices here are to have a clear data governance policy in the organization, and then be sure to get informed consent before you use the employee's data, right? So get the employees to give you their consent before you use the data. And then as much as possible, anonymize the data, especially if you are having public presentations and you want to make use of the data. It's important that you anonymize them in such a way that it's difficult for unauthorized people to associate a particular information to some employee in the organization, right? So in HR data management, there are some challenges. And one of the challenges is that sometimes you have data silos across departments. So in one organization, you have several departments. If the departments are working as silos, then you have scattered information across the various departments. And sometimes it's difficult to work with that data if it's scattered all around and not in a standard format. Okay. Then there are also integration issues. All right. There are some times that it's difficult to integrate the systems. For example, you were using an old version of a particular system. If there's an upgrade and you are not careful, you may have to switch all together so that moving or transitioning from the old version to a new one becomes a very complicated task. Okay, so sometimes there are issues when you are trying to integrate the systems with other functions. Okay, and then you realize that in every organization you have people who tend to resist the adoption of technology. Okay, and so if you want to collect data, sometimes it's difficult for such people to open up and give you the kind of information that you need. Okay, so one of the challenges that you can face is this resistance, okay? And then another challenge is ensuring data quality and standardization, especially when people are getting to fill information by themselves. It's difficult to get them to do the right thing so that when it's time for analysis, it will make the work difficult for you. Okay, so it's sometimes challenging to ensure data quality and standardization. And then finally, it's also difficult to balance accessibility with security. Here's the case: you have to ensure that the data is secure. But also, on the other hand, is where you have to ensure that the data is accessible to whoever needs the information and is authorized. So sometimes it becomes difficult to balance data accessibility with data security. Right. So in a nutshell, all we've been saying is that HR data management is very effective. Okay, it's very essential, very important if you want to ensure that HR operations and strategic planning is effective. All right. And it's important that you have accurate and ethical handling of HR data, because that is the only way you'll be able to enhance decision making and compliance in the organization. Okay. And you have technologies that are coming to ensure that this data management is made easier, right? So whether you are collecting the data or you are analyzing the data, emerging technologies are making it very simple. So just with the click or something, you get your analysis done. Okay. And then, even though there are challenges, it's important that the the department in charge of the data, which is the HR department in charge of the data, ensures that you mitigate the risks as to the best of your ability, as much as you can. Okay, minimize the exposure to harm. All right, and ensure that your employees are safe. Okay. So what then are the discussion questions? Today you want to look at the implications of poor HR data management in every organization, right? I want you to check what these implications are, and then we would discuss them. Then number two, how can organizations balance data accessibility with security? Okay, let's think through it. And then I want you to look at the impact of AI, all right, in data management. Let's look at, let's do a quick forecast and see how this will impact the data management in the next 5 years. Okay, so these are what you have to do today. Let's get it done and then discuss it. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you shortly.